Why isn't Belarus a part of Russia? The untold story of Europe's last dictatorship. Picture this. It's 1991, and the Soviet Union is collapsing like a house of cards. While Ukraine fights for independence and the Baltic states flee westward, one republic quietly slips away, almost unnoticed. Belarus, a nation most people can't locate on a map, suddenly finds itself free. But here's the twist that would define the next 3 decades. They didn't really want to be. This is the story of the most peculiar independence in modern history, where a country that never sought freedom became the stage for one of Europe's strangest political dramas. The accidental nation Belarus shouldn't exist, at least not according to conventional wisdom. Unlike Ukraine with its distinct Cossack heritage or the Baltic states with their Germanic influences, Belarus seemed like Russia's forgotten twin. Same Orthodox Christianity, similar languages, shared Slavic roots. When the USSR dissolved, Belarus appeared destined for swift reunification with its giant neighbor. But history had other plans. The key lies in understanding that Belarus was unjust white Russia. It was the crossroads of empires. For centuries, these lands belonged to the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, one of medieval Europe's largest states. Lithuanian nobles, Polish Catholics, Jewish merchants, and Russian Orthodox peasants created a unique cultural cocktail that defied simple categorization. While Moscow built an empire, Belarus learned to survive at the intersection of competing powers. When the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth controlled these territories, Belarusian nobles spoke Polish, practiced Catholicism, and developed a distinct identity separate from Muscovite Russia. The Russian Empire later absorbed Belarus, but the cultural DNA remained different. Belarusians were just Russians, who happened to live farther west. They were a people shaped by centuries of being neither fully Polish nor fully Russian. The man who stopped history, enter Alexander Lukashenko in 1994, a collective farm director who became Europe's last dictator through the most unlikely path imaginable. When Belarus held its first presidential election, this political nobody promised to restore the Soviet good old days. In a nation traumatized by economic collapse and nostalgic for stability, Lukashenko's message resonated perfectly. But here's where the story takes its most fascinating turn. Lukashenko didn't just win power, he froze time itself. While Russia underwent shock therapy capitalism under Boris Yeltsin, Belarus remained suspended in Soviet amber. State enterprises continued operating. Collective farms persisted, and the secret police kept their old name, the KGB. Lukashenko created something unprecedented. A functioning Soviet republic without the Soviet Union. This wasn't mere nostalgia, it was brilliant political calculation. By maintaining the old system, Lukashenko eliminated the oligarch class that captured Russia's economy. No Berezovsky, no Abramovich, no political challengers with billions of dollars. The state controlled everything, and Lukashenko controlled the state. The Putin paradox, Vladimir Putin's rise in 1999 should have changed everything. Here was a Russian leader who shared Lukashenko's authoritarian instincts and Soviet nostalgia. The two men seemed natural allies, even friends. Putin needed Belarus as a buffer against NATO expansion. Lukashenko needed Russian energy subsidies to keep his Soviet-style economy afloat. They signed union treaties, created joint institutions, and spoke of eventual reunification. On paper, Belarus and Russia were merging into a single state. In reality, something far more complex was happening. Lukashenko had discovered the perfect strategy. Promise everything, deliver nothing. He would sign integration agreements with great fanfare, then quietly ignore them. Russian oil and gas kept flowing at subsidized prices, but true integration remained perpetually in progress. Belarus became the master of what diplomats call integration fatigue, endless negotiations that never quite reached their destination. The brothers who never were. The relationship between Putin and Lukashenko reveals the central paradox of Belarus-Russia relations. These are brothers separated by history. They too. Authoritarian leaders who need each other but can never fully trust each other. Putin tolerates Lukashenko's games because the alternatives are worse. A democratic Belarus might join NATO and the EU, putting Western military bases 200 kilometers from Moscow. A chaotic Belarus might create refugee flows and security problems. Better to have a predictable dictator, even one who occasionally causes headaches. Lukashenko plays a different game entirely. He is not the loyal little brother Moscow imagines. He is a survivor who understands that true independence comes not from strength, but from being indispensable to stronger powers, while never fully submitting to them. The revolution that changed everything, August 2020, shattered this delicate balance. When Lukashenko claimed victory in obviously fraudulent elections, hundreds of thousands of Belarusians took to the streets. For the first time in the post-Soviet era, Belarus experienced a genuine popular uprising. The protests revealed something Putin and Lukashenko had missed. A generation of Belarusians who didn't remember the Soviet Union and didn't want to be Russian. These weren't oligarchs or Western agents, they were teachers. IT workers, students, and pensioners who simply wanted honest elections and basic freedoms. Lukashenko survived only through massive repression and Russian support. Putin, fearing a successful democratic revolution on his border, provided crucial backing, but the crisis fundamentally altered their relationship. Lukashenko was no longer an independent player. He had become Putin's client, dependent on Russian support for survival. The prisoner of Minsk today, Belarus exists in a strange limbo. Officially independent, actually subordinate. Lukashenko remains in power, but as Putin's increasingly desperate dependent rather than a crafty equal. Russian military bases, closer economic integration, and political coordination have transformed Belarus into something approaching a Russian province, but not quite. The 2020 protests prove that Belarusian identity is real and distinct from Russian identity. Even if the current government denies this reality, a new generation of Belarusians has emerged that sees their future with Europe, not as Russia's appendage. The last act, Belarus remains separate from Russia because of a historical accident that became a political choice. Lukashenko's Soviet nostalgia created a unique system that could uneasily be absorbed into Putin's Russia. The dictator who promised to restore the USSR ended up preserving a Belarusian state that might otherwise have disappeared. But history isn't finished with Belarus. The 2020 protests revealed cracks in the foundation that repression cannot permanently seal. Whether Belarus ultimately joins Russia, achieves genuine independence, or finds some third path depends on forces now building beneath the surface of authoritarian control. Sometimes the most important question isn't why something happened, but why it hasn't happened yet. Belarus and Russia remain separate not because of ancient ethnic differences or grand geopolitical strategies, but because a collective farm director learned to play the game better than anyone imagined possible, until he didn't.